If our first view of the Caucasus must have been similar to that which met the first Western settlers here some 2,500 years ago, it is perhaps now time to ask, who are the native inhabitants of this land? The narrow strip of territory dividing Black from Caspian seas is home to Europe's, and let's accept we are in Europe, most variegated patchwork of ethnic groups and languages. Apart from a number of languages belonging to families not native to the region but which are now spoken here, such as Russian, Armenian and Azeri, there is a multitude of languages belonging to the various peoples who are judged to be autochthonous for the simple reason that we do not know whence they came. So complex is the linguistic situation in the Caucasus that the 10th century Arab geographer al-Mas'udi styled the Caucasus the Mountain of Tongues. There are then some 40 so-called languages of the Caucasus. They are divided into two, some would say three language families. Georgian is the only Caucasian language to possess a long history of writing, which dates back to the late 4th century. The early Soviets sought to overcome Tsarism's legacy of illiteracy by creating a number of so-called young written languages, and Abkhaz was one of these. Though the first attempts had been made to establish a written form for Abkhaz in the late 19th century, its history of writing really dates from only about a century ago. Its current script is based on Cyrillic, used for Russian, though a language reform was introduced in 1999. During its relatively short history of writing, it has been through more than its fair share of scripts. It does, however, share with a number of mainly North Caucasian peoples a strong oral folklore tradition with an epic cycle of a race of giants called the Narts. And one of the towering figures from those early days was Dmitry Gulia, or Dermit Gulia, as he is known in Abkhaz, 1874 to 1960. He has justifiably been awarded the sobriquet of Father of Abkhazian Literature because of his many pathfinding contributions to so many areas of literature. I'm holding in my hand just one example, which is a translation from Russian he published in 1921. And we happen to be standing at the moment in Gulia's House Museum, which lies at the center of the Republic's capital, which is known to the world as Sukhum, although the Abkhazians have their own designation for the town, which is Akwa. At the age of 17, Gulia created the first practical teaching alphabet for Abkhaz, which he used himself traveling around Abkhazian villages. And in 1925, he produced this book, the very first history of Abkhazia. But let us return to history. Another colony established by the ancient Greeks along this coast was called Dioscurias, later renamed Sebastopolis. And I'm standing here amid the Roman ruins of Sebastopol alongside Sukhum's famous promenade along the seafront. Pliny, a writer of the 1st century AD, mentioned that the Romans needed no fewer than 130 interpreters in order to conduct business at this spot. And this underlines the linguistic complexity of not only Abkhazia, but the whole Caucasus. A whole range of ancient artifacts is available here at the State Museum for visitors to appreciate. classical remains are not the oldest type of surface structures to be found within Abkhazia, however. There are two types of massive stone structures, or megaliths, reminiscent of the sort of things we find all over Europe and in England at Stonehenge, for instance. I'm sitting here beside one of these, which is an ancient burial chamber, 5,000 years old. This type of burial chamber is known as a dolmen, or a hatun in Abkhaz. This particular example was found at the village of Eshera, just to the north of the capital Sukhum, and was brought here to be reconstructed, standing outside the entrance to the State Museum. But the descendants of the people who are assumed to have created such archaic monuments have not always found themselves able to control the destiny of their native land. The Greeks and Romans were but the first of a series of foreigners who strove to dominate this territory. However, before we leave the Roman period, it is important to investigate a very important development, namely the introduction of Christianity here. Officially, Christianity was introduced into Abkhazia during the reign of the Emperor Justinian. Justinian reigned between the years 543 and 546. But there is evidence that Christianity was relevant here in Pitsunda long before that. The early church held a very important universal gathering at the Council of Nicaea in the year 325. And in the list of those attending the council was one Stratophil, who was named as the Bishop of Pitsunda. But of course today, Pitsunda is most famous, both in Abkhazia and far beyond, for the beautiful church which you can see behind me. This is the largest church in Abkhazia, and clearly it has been restored. It dates from its original building from the 6th century, and the building continued through to the 10th. In the famous restaurant by the rocks above the village of Eshera, I met somebody I formerly knew as Father Nazari, but today he has taken the name Ignatius. This was when he became a monk. He explained to me his views about current problems in the church, the differences between the older and younger generation of priests, for instance, and also problems he sees in Abkhazia in general, feeling that if more people were to return to the Russian Orthodox Church which he serves, then this would only help the democratic process in Abkhazia. We are now in the church at Dranda, 20-minute drive southeast of Sukhum. The church dates to the 6th century. It is modelled on the world-famous Hagia Sophia at Istanbul, which was founded by the Emperor Justinian. Anyone who has been to Hagia Sophia will recognize the similarities immediately. Interestingly, this church represents a rather unique architectural style for the Caucasus, and one of the features which is unique is its resemblance directly to Hagia Sophia in its cupola. The church stands at the center of what was once a monastery complex. The monastery itself no longer functions, but church services were reintroduced here some 4 years ago and now attract a regular weekly congregation.